this country, and these are the same powers that we are using to remove individuals with no legal right to be in these countries. And of course these are exactly the same powers that only recently and again today she was saying that could be used if we hadn't left the EU. And yet again the Honourable Lady, the party opposite, talks about the policy being unworkable and extortionate, but it can't be both, because clearly we've said from the outset, that this is a partnership based on working with Rwanda. And if I may, Madam Deputy Speaker, there is nothing more humane than turning a blind eye to those that are being smuggled, not just across the channel, but also in lorries. And we have a global collective responsibility to work with international partners, which clearly the party opposite have shut the door firmly on doing.
You have been listening there to the Home Secretary of the UK, Priti Patel, who has been addressing members of Parliament given the government policy from the UK of deporting, of resending several migrants, asylum seekers, to say, from the UK to Rwanda, a policy that's been highly controversial here in this country. A flight, if you remember, was expected to take place, as first flight from the UK to Rwanda, the best place expected to take place last night. It was stopped at the last minute by the European Courts of Human Rights in Strasbourg. Let me tell you what Priti Patel has said in the last few moments. She said, we will not be put off, she said, by the inevitable last-minute legal challenges. She went on to say, we will not let usual suspects or mobs, she said, to prevent asylum seekers from being sent to Rwanda. She said that the policy, that the decision, the intervention by the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg was disappointing and surprising, but that the government remains committed, she said, to this policy, and the preparation for the future flights have begun. She went on to say that we are a generous and welcoming country. Illegal inaction is not an option. You then heard, after hearing from Priti Patel, you're looking at your screen there, you then heard from the shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, who really had a blistering speech, calling the policy shameful and shambles, and said that the Home Secretary, Priti Patel, has no one to blame but herself. She then said that the whole policy itself was unworkable, unethical, and it won't stop criminal gangs. Anada Bashir has been tracking the Rwanda migrants controversy from Paris right from the beginning. Anada, I really, you know, what she said, what we heard there from Priti Patel, pretty much saying, look, they've intervened, but she was clear to point out, Nada, that really that the decision by the European Court of Human Rights was not ruled on the government's policy or the relocation, not saying it was unlawful, basically saying, we are going to continue trying this. Your thoughts?
Well, yes, absolutely, Issa, but the key question here is there is a much broader legal challenge at stake as well, looking at the entire policy as a whole. Now, the European Court of Human Rights has intervened on behalf of 3 of those asylum seekers that were set to be deported on last night's flight. But it has to be noted that, you know, from Friday, from that first legal challenge that we heard at the High Court, there were supposed to be more than 100 asylum seekers on that flight. And that figure very quickly dwindled down over the coming days to 7 yesterday. So the rest of these cases were cases that were thrown out, deportation notices that were either postponed or cancelled because of challenges that were heard here in the UK. And that has been the message that we have heard repeatedly from advocacy groups representing these asylum seekers, that there needs to be more time for these asylum seekers who have received notices, many of them in the middle of May, I have to add. There needs to be more time for their legal challenges to be heard, for them to challenge that deportation notice, and also, of course, for that wider challenge looking at the policy as a whole to be heard here in the UK. Because, you know, the Home Secretary just there, we heard Priti Patel describing it as the usual suspects, putting up opposition to this policy. But I have to say, these aren't just the opposition figures that we're seeing in the Labour Party opposing this policy. The UNHCR, the UN's refugee agency, has described this policy as unlawful. They have flagged inadequate safeguarding measures in Rwanda for asylum seekers. There have been repeated concerns by other rights groups. The government has carried out a human rights assessment of Rwanda. They believe it's safe. They believe the country has a history of welcoming refugees and asylum seekers. And of course, these asylum seekers will then have to go to Rwanda and have their asylum claims heard there. They will not be offered immediate resettlement. But I also have to note, Human Rights Watch has really pulled apart that report. They say the government has cherry-picked, even ignored facts on the ground. So there are some serious concerns. It is not just coming from the opposition party. And I have to also say, those legal challenges heard at the High Court were also put forward by a civil service representing some of the government's own Home Office civil servants. So those concerns come within the government as well. Isa?
And it's such a good point. Of course, the basis for the government policies, the argument they're making that you have made throughout, Nada, is that, you know, this is to discourage others from crossing the channel. This is to stop human trafficking, human smugglers. Now, I believe you've been speaking earlier in this week, you were speaking to those in France still willing, really not deterred to make that trip. What are they telling you?
Yeah, we spoke to some asylum seekers, refugees, migrants in those camps in Calais in northern France. Now, some people were confused, they were distressed, they didn't know what options they had left because they were afraid that if they did attempt to make that crossing into the UK, they would be deported to Rwanda, but also equally afraid to go home, to go elsewhere. But obviously, the vast majority of people we spoke to said that they were undeterred, that they would still go ahead and attempt to make that crossing into the UK. And especially now that we've seen those cancellations, those deportation notices really dwindle down to those single-digit figures, and then now no flight taking off. Many said that they were undeterred. They would try their luck, go to the UK, and hopefully the government would listen to their claims and they would be accepted, allowed to settle in the UK. And, you know, we spoke to Care for Calais. That's one of the advocacy groups that put forward those High Court legal challenges. So they do a lot of work with the asylum seekers in northern France, but also in the UK, those in detention there. And they said, you know, this idea that this will be a deterrence, this will prevent asylum seekers from crossing the channel, is simply false. That we will continue to see these numbers because these asylum seekers have already been through so much, through such long and difficult journeys, often fleeing dangerous situations, that this is just another obstacle that they have to face. And that is how they see it. And in fact, just on Tuesday, on the day that flight was supposed to take off, the Ministry of Defence recorded 444 migrants attempting to make that crossing, either arriving in the UK on small boats or being found in the channel by UK security forces. So we are still seeing those rising numbers. That is the highest figure we've seen attempting to make that crossing since the Rwanda deal was announced. And as we head into summer, typically, we do see that figure go up higher. And of course, you know, these people are fleeing desperate situations. We met people from Afghanistan, from Kurdistan, from Syria, from Iran. Many said that they simply couldn't go home. It is too dangerous.
Yeah, exactly. It was a point that we heard from Yvette Cooper, the Shadow Home Secretary, basically saying that it's not stopping criminal gangs, it's not stopping people from making the trip, and even calling it a government by gimmick, this very policy. Of course, Priti Patel says she remains committed, and the government remains committed, she said, to this policy. Nada, I know you'll stay on top of the story. Thank you very much. And we, of course, will stay with this story throughout the day. In the meantime, now I want to send it back to New Day.
Not built for the strange climate that we are seeing now. Now, I am standing purposefully back from the edge of the river because here, this was where a large house for park staff was located. And we can show you the video now of that house falling into the river. Now, we are in Gardner, which is at the northern end of the park. The road down here is still closed. We managed to get down because we're pressed. There is a bridge washed out, but it is now passable. But getting into the park, there is no chance. That road is just gone. So 2.2 million acres, 500 geysers, what the oldest national park in the world. A lot of it is not going to be accessible for quite some time. Now, the other issue is that there were about 10,000 people in the park at the time. Now, a lot of them were airlifted by helicopter from here in Gardner up out of the danger zone. But the problem is going to be that this might not yet be over because there is still about 12 inches of snowpack up there in the park, and they are expecting higher temperatures this weekend, maybe up in the 60s and 70s at high elevation, which could melt a lot of that snow and make the Yellowstone River rise once again. Guys?
Yeah, we can see the snowpack on those mountains behind you there. So when you're
Yeah.
talking about this lasting for a while, obviously this is peak season. How long are we talking?
Well, I mean, Brianna, they have to rebuild that entire road that runs parallel to this river. And I mean, that could take months. So that's the northern part of the park. This part was the hardest hit by the Yellowstone River. Now, the western access to the park, the southern access to the park, they're saying that those could open a little sooner. They might have to implement some kind of reservation system down in the south when they do begin to let people in, so that that part of the park doesn't get overwhelmed. You know, a lot of people are on summer vacation. A lot of people are really looking forward to getting out and seeing America after being stuck at home for so long. And this has caused a major problem. I mean, I could not believe last night when this guy down here was telling me he thinks that could be it for the whole season up here in Gardner, because the infrastructure is just gone. There is no way to actually get into the park from up here.
Yeah,
no way.
They're talking they may
Guys.
not be able to open it till next fall at the earliest at this point because of the incredible damage that you're seeing, Nick. There was a house there, and now it's gone. It's just gone.
Unbelievable. Nick Watt, thank you so
Yep.
much live
Yep.
for us from Yellowstone.
Other news this morning, the January 6th committee is setting up tomorrow's hearing. Vice Chair Liz Cheney released this video.
The Select Committee will examine President Trump's relentless effort on January 6th and in the days beforehand to pressure Vice President Pence to refuse to count lawful electoral votes. As a federal judge has indicated, this likely violated 2 federal criminal statutes.
The committee released an extended portion of video from Trump White House attorney Eric Hirschman's deposition, in which he discussed warning controversial attorney John Eastman, who was attempting to overturn the 2020 election.
Eventually, he said, orderly transition. I said, good, John. Now I'm going to give you the best free legal advice you're ever getting in your life. Get a great effing criminal defense lawyer. You're going to need it.
Joining us now, retired U.S. District Judge, the Honorable Shira Shenlin. She is a fellow at the College of Commercial Arbiters. Judge, great to see you again. Why does John Eastman need a great effing lawyer? What are the crimes that they are suggesting he may have committed?
Well, I must start with saying not just he, it's the crimes that he and President Trump may have committed together. The first one is obstruction of an official proceeding with a corrupt mindset. And I can explain more about what that is if you'd like. But the second one is a conspiracy to defraud the United States by deceitful or dishonest means.
By deceitful or dishonest means. And specifically, what actions are you talking about, and how does the pressuring of Pence factor into this?
It's exactly what the deceitful and dishonest means are. These two met with Pence, they met with his staff, they kept urging him to reject the electoral votes or to delay the vote, and he had no power to do that. They knew that. They knew that it would violate the Electoral Count Act, and they went right ahead and did it. So that's why both statutes are in play here, both the obstruction of the official proceeding, which was the counting of those votes. They would obstruct it by trying to get Pence to override the will of the people and prevent the peaceful transfer of power.
By corrupt means. Now, talk to us about the significance of that word.
Well, it has to mean that you know what you're doing is wrong. That's all it means. You can't even have a good faith view that maybe this is something you can get away with. That won't work. This would violate the law, and they both knew it. They had had much advice. The president had heard from his advisors that this couldn't be done. Eastman had even consulted the former judge he clerked for, a very conservative judge, Judge Luddick, said, no way can this be done. So that's the corrupt means. It's the same as the deceitful and dishonest conduct.
Cheney, when she was talking about that in that little clip we saw of what she released, she put out on Twitter, she's referring to a federal judge's ruling in a civil case from March that Trump and Eastman had likely committed felonies. Does that carry weight? I mean, how much of a judgment, does that matter? Or is she just trying to say, look, someone else found this to be the case?
Well, that's right. I don't think it carries legal weight, but it carries persuasive weight. This is a very fine judge. His issue was whether certain documents could be released to the committee pursuant to subpoena. He had to review those documents, and he wrote a very careful opinion reviewing all these documents under what's called the attorney-client privilege, work product privilege. But then he said there's something called the crime fraud exception. And if this is in furtherance of a crime, then it's going to get turned over. And he went through document by document. In the end, he focused on one in particular, which laid out this plan that they had to get Pence to override the will of the people. And that, he said, was in furtherance of a crime. And he said it is likely that this would be a crime. So it's not that it's controlling, but we call it persuasive.
Judge Shenlin, thanks so much for being with us and helping us understand what was going on here.
Thank you for having me.
Capitol Police say there is no evidence that a Republican congressman led any kind of reconnaissance tour with Trump supporters on the eve of January 6. Barry Loudermilk's tour of parts of the Capitol complex had come under scrutiny by the January 6 committee. After reviewing security footage, police have concluded that it was simply a visit by constituents. The Capitol Police chief in a letter saying, quote, "We train our officers on being alert for people conducting surveillance or reconnaissance, and we do not consider any of the activities we observed as suspicious." January 6 committee leaders asked Loudermilk to submit to questioning about the tour, saying they were looking into whether rioters were casing the Capitol complex before the insurrection. And we do have some new details this morning on what a white nationalist group was planning to do at an Idaho Pride parade.
Plus, Don Lemon joins us live with his interview with the White House press secretary and her answer on Democrats questioning the president's age.
隅田北斎美術館では当館所蔵の富岳36景神奈川沖浪浦を富士フィルムの協力で高解像度デジタル撮影を行っています。
高画素かつ高精細で撮れることによって様々な楽しみ方がさらに広がるかなというふうに思ってます。それがですね、国を越えたり地域を越えたりすることでその資料価値っていうのがさらに上がっていくかなというふうに考えてます。
Assalamu alaikum.
It's great to see you.
Welcome to the Qatar Economic Forum powered by Bloomberg.
Some people say that there's a de-globalization going on, but I prefer to think of a re-globalization.
Our accomplished speakers, from heads of state to business and policy leaders, will discuss evolving technologies, education, culture, sustainability, and the impact on the economy.
Back in person, the 2022 Afreximbank annual meetings will bring together high-profile continental and global leaders to harness and leverage Africa's incredible potential. Register now.
Monday, let's lift every voice. A CNN concert event. The Roots, Yolanda Adams, Earth, Wind and Fire, Lucky Day, Mary Mary, Killer Mike, Anthony Hamilton, Billy Porter, Debbie Allen Dance Academy, Michelle Williams, and so much more. Juneteenth, a global celebration for freedom. Live from the Hollywood Bowl, only on CNN.
Afghan women are afraid that this is the beginning of your efforts to erase them from the workspace.
Malumness, it's not clear. Even if we appear with the burqa, maybe they will say that women's voices are forbidden.
Did you ever imagine that you would be prevented from going to school?
Girls' education is fundamental to the dignity of Afghan life.
Do you believe that young girls will be allowed to go to school here in Afghanistan?
Advancement, adaptation, new Marketplace Middle East.
From digital banking to biometric payments, we take a look at innovation and technology in the future of finance.
Marketplace Middle East, Saturday on CNN.
This morning, we're learning some new details about the arrest of these 31 members of the white nationalist group called Patriot Front and their derailed plot to start a riot at a pride parade in Idaho. And there's this new court filing that shows the men had protective gear. They were well organized with preparations. They had call locations. They had drill times. They actually had 2 backup plans. CNN's Sarah Seidner is live in Salt Lake City with more on that. Quite well prepared, Sarah.
Yeah, and what is interesting is that we are now seeing in their own words what their plans were because they wrote them down, according to the affidavit that police filed. The document was typed up, according to police, and discussed the group being there to raise a voice against what they called moral depravity, which permits events like this to take place. What they are referring to, police say, is the Pride Parade that was about to take place in Coeur d'Alene. And so it is clear what their intent was. If you look at their own documents, they also talk about antagonizing and causing disruption. And how would they do that? Well, police say they had plenty of things to do that. They had a smoke bomb. A lot of the guys had things like long poles. Yes, they had flags on top of them, but they could certainly use those poles to create violence. They also had metal shields with them, and they had protective gear, much like the gear, police said, that they use in riot situations, which is partly why these 31 men, all dressed in similar clothing, with these piled into a U-Haul, somebody spotted them. And when you read some of the things that they said, it appears to be sort of like a military operation where they had times and places and dates and GPS and everything sort of plotted out as to what they were going to do, where they were going to meet, where they're going to go. And so it was really disturbing when you think about this small town that is trying to show love to everyone in the town, and then to have this group show up from out of town. By the way, all 31 members are not from Coeur d'Alene. They're from other places, most of them from out of state, not even from Idaho. And so this really rattled the community. But it was discovered by a witness who saw these men who looked like what he referred to as a little army getting out of this U-Haul and standing around in all of these similar outfits. Now we know from their own writing, from their own plans, that they were intending to disrupt and cause a major problem for those who were gathering just to show love to the LGBTQ community. Guys?
Sarah Seidner, thank you so much. Incredibly alarming details there, live for us from Salt Lake City.
Joining us now is Don Lemon, who conveniently anchors a show called Don Lemon Tonight on CNN. He's also the author of This is the Fire, What I Say to My Friends About Racism. Don, nice to see you.
Good morning to both of you.
Listen, you just heard Sarah's report there. What's the big takeaway for you?
Is that this is what you say to your friends about racism and about bigotry is the big takeaway. And this is the equipment that they had. That's what separates, quite honestly, this crazy, which is of another magnitude just from your average, everyday hate-filled bigot. This is beyond. These are people who all came together, 30-some people, and I would imagine that there are more somewhere else and that they're recruiting more people. 30-some young men who are, people who are trying to celebrate pride, who are trying to celebrate, quite frankly, the joys and the freedoms and the luxuries of being an American, which is should be afforded to all of us. And they want to go against that and create harm and havoc. The thing that got me is, and Sarah said it, that they wanted to raise a voice against the moral depravity which permits events such as this to take place. Not even considering, right, the hypocrisy here, their own moral depravity of trying to disrupt this event and possibly harm people. This goes against the laws of America, the laws of our society, and definitely against the laws of any religion that I have ever read about, that I know about. So that's their own hypocrisy here.
The mother of one of the guys, of one of the 31, who is from Utah, he's from Utah, spoke to the Daily Beast. And I think we all have a question about what prompts someone to do this or to join a group like this. And she says, this isn't the son I raised. But she felt that he was looking for some kind of brotherhood, that he was actually brought in part by the community that this group gave to him after some personal issues that he was having in his life. I wonder what you think about that.
Look, it's, I have empathy for people who are dealing with this, especially a mother. You know, I can only imagine my mother and you as a mother going through this. But I'm always surprised when people say I had no idea or didn't know.
She knew. She had some tip-offs.
Yeah,
but she doesn't understand where it came from.
Well, of course we understand where it comes from. Of course we do. Look at what happened on January 6th. We understand that people can be co-opted by certain people, certain individuals, certain groups, by the internet. And we should not pretend that that does not happen, that people can be co-opted by bigotry and hatred, some of which our country was founded on, and some of which most of which we haven't dealt with in our society. And we're talking about now, we are dealing with in a very big way the dangers of not standing up for our democracy, not standing up for what's right in our society. And if you don't do that, then you get an insurrection, then you get a Patriot front. And the idea that they use the term patriot, that they have co-opted this term patriot to mean something that is really just bastardize the term patriot. That's not what a patriot is. Patriots don't do this.
And she said that pulled him in.
Yeah.
That bastardization of that word.
Of the word patriot. That's not what patriot. We have this idea that patriotism is something that we stand up and for the flag and put our hands over our heart. Patriotism is something that is active, that we have to make sure every day that we live up to the ideals of patriotism. It's not just pretending that we are patriots because we can carry a gun, because we can walk around, a group of us looking like we work at a Best Buy. If you want to wear khakis and blue shirts like that, go get a job at a Best Buy. Don't try to harm your fellow Americans.
Don, you had an interview with the White House press secretary 2 nights ago that is still making news this morning. People are still talking about it because, first of all, it was a terrific interview on a wide range of subjects. But you asked about reports that are now coming out. There was a New York Times story. You're hearing it from other Democrats as well, who are asking questions about whether President Biden, these are Democrats asking questions about whether President Biden should be the nominee in 2024. I want to play an exchange.
Does the president have the stamina, physically and mentally, do you think, to continue on even after 2024?
Don, you're asking me this question. Oh my gosh, he's the president of the United States. You know, I can't even keep up with it. We just got back from New Mexico. We just got back from California. That is not a question that we should be even asking.
What do you think of her response, Tom?
Of course, we should be asking that question. First of all, I'm a journalist. That's my job, is to ask questions. And as the person who represents the administration and the president, it's her job to answer those questions. I would not be doing my job if I didn't ask that. Let's just be honest about this. I didn't question whether, I'm not being ageist in saying that the president of the United States is too old to be president. We can judge that. I think that's an individual thing, right? But I do think that as the president of the United States, we should know the health history, both physically and mentally, of the United States, the president of the United States. We certainly question the former president's capabilities and whether or not he should have the mental capacity, quite frankly, and the physical capacity to be the president of the United States. And we did it a lot. He had COVID. Can he physically be the president of the United States? It has been said, even in these hearings, that he is unhinged. That he is out of his mind because of what things that he was doing. Now, I'm not comparing the two men, but it is our job as journalists and as Americans to know the physical and mental capacity of the president of the United States. And I want to be very clear about this. I think Joe Biden is a nice man. He's going to be, he's almost 80 years old. I am in my 50s. I have trouble recalling things. I'm not as sharp as I used to be.
Late 50s.
Stop it. We're going to fight about this. Look, but think about this. I'm not as sharp as I used to be. And the job of President of the United States is a really, really tough job. Maybe he is. I'm sure he's up to the job. But it is my job as a journalist to ask. And the reason I ask that question is because there are reports that are coming out. There's a report in the New York Times about what Democrats are saying, that there are whispers. And we know that as journalists. We know that there are whispers. And we interview the president. We watch him in press conferences. We watch him do interviews he was on Jimmy Kimmel the other night. And quite frankly, I had trouble following him. His answers are not succinct. And I understand that he is an issue as a stutterer as a child. I interviewed him several times leading up to when he was running for president, and as president of the United States, I've interviewed him. And he has trouble sometimes connecting, and his answers sometimes don't make sense. And so I want to know, as a journalist, as an American, does this president have the mental and physical stamina to run again as president of the United States, considering the reports that are coming out and considering my eyes and my ears? I can hear him and I can see him every single day. And as someone who is, my mother will be 80 this year, I doubt that she would want to be president of the United States. And she is a sharp woman. And so I think we need to really think about that. Younger people being more involved in the political process. Younger people, of course, can be involved in the political process, but we need to think about, at a certain time in one's life, perhaps they should think about that. And that includes Donald Trump as well, who is not far behind the current president of the United States.
I've also seen you on social media, Don.
Wait, and I think liberals, hold on, this is you putting up the LeBron thing, but liberals need to stop having a double standard when it comes to questions that we can ask Democrats and questions that we can ask Republicans. I reported a number of times, many times, on Donald Trump's fitness for office. And it is okay and expected for journalists to report on the current president's fitness for office, whether that president is a Democrat or a Republican. We have to have the same standards for both. Sorry about that.
No. Look, I just was trying to give you a little promo for this video you have with LeBron James, which is incredibly compelling. Just tell people what it is.
This is LeBron James' show called The Shop. It is Uninterrupted is the production company. It's Maverick Carter's production company, NPR's Republican production company. And they asked me to be part of this program called The Shop. And these are conversations that I would love to have a lot more of here on CNN, the conversation that we're having now. And it is just no holds barred. And we talk about issues of the day. Amy Schumer talked about being a comedian in this climate, where people are being canceled just for making jokes, where people are getting slapped and attacked on stage. She talked about that. We talked about the role of journalists in this society. And I had to inform them that we no longer live in a Walter Cronkite society where there are 3 major networks and just a couple of major newspapers around the country, that us as anchors have different roles depending on what we do. If I was an anchor on a broadcast network, I would not be able to give my point of view as much, and nor would I feel the need to be able to have to give my point of view as much as I do now. But I'm a cable news anchor. And I'm on unscripted pretty much for 2 hours every single day, and then 8 minutes in the morning, which you said, Madonna.
I think it's a lot more than 8 minutes.
We're going on 9.5.
So not giving your point of view and not stating the truth and not really standing up for what is right, and I think is an imperative. And so I would like to be able to have those conversations much more. And I also had to inform them that, during the time that they were, this time that people are being so romanticizing about journalists, is that there were no journalists on television who even looked like me. So we live in a different time now where it is okay to give your point of view, but one must be factual about the things that we are telling the American people, putting in front of them.
It was an incredibly compelling discussion that you had with them. You were my favorite character in that show, just to be clear.
Even more than LeBron James?
Oh, yeah. By a lot.
But one thing we did come to a consensus about.
We need to explore that another time.
No, it says more about my affection for Don. And you know what, Don?
Yeah.
We're going to leave it there.
I know we are, but let me tell you, we have to.
Then we're not leaving it there, to be clear.
We cannot have a false sense of equivalency about what is happening when it comes to politics in our country. There's one party right now that's not operating in fact, that has been misleading the American people, and that is the Republican Party, sadly, of which I used to be a member of the Republican Party years ago. I'm not a member of any party right now, but we cannot pretend as journalists that it is equal. It is not. Democrats are doing their Democrat thing, and they're being, liberal, and they want all these things. But that's the way normal politics operates, and we can deal with those things. But what the Republican Party is doing now, and not standing up for our democracy and being quiet, that is very dangerous. We cannot fight all of these things and make a better world and do what Larry Summers told me last night about getting our economy together if we don't have a functioning democracy. And so we as journalists need to stand up for that and not pretend that it's that we can both sides this. This is not a both sides thing.
you want to hear a lot more of this, all right, you can watch Don Lemon on Don Lemon tonight at 10 p.m. right here.
Are we going to leave it there?
On CNN. Well, no, we left it there before. We tried to leave it there before, but that didn't work out.
You didn't get off the train.
Don, listen, thank you so much.
I love you guys. You guys are the best. It's so good to see you.
Nice to see you in person.
Know. We'll always have the
only
we'll always have the
I'm
lead,
here.
John.
Don's here. No coincidence.
Right, new this morning, President Biden penning a letter to the major oil refinery companies in an effort to address rising gas prices. The Energy Secretary, Jennifer Granholm, joins us next.
Golf at a crossroads. So what does it mean for the Ryder Cup? John Rahm expresses his concerns. The draw is officially set as the 32nd and final team books their place at the World Cup in Qatar. And we know lightning can strike twice, but how about 3 times? We're gearing up for the Stanley Cup Final. Hi, thanks for joining us. Welcome along to World Sport Live from London with me, Amanda Davis. Rory McIlroy has won himself a whole lot of fans in the last 24 hours for not shying away from saying what many have been thinking. As golf continues to try and recalibrate and work out what happens next in the wake of the inaugural Saudi-backed Live Golf Series event that has driven a wedge through the game, the former world #1 and 4-time major winner has become golf's most outspoken defendant of its tradition. McIlroy turned down the offer of joining the Breakaway League. He's remained with the PGA Tour and, speaking ahead of this week's US Open, had a strong message for those who've jumped ship.
I took a lot of players' statements at face value. I guess that's what I got wrong. You had people committed to the PGA Tour, and that's what the statements were put out, and people went back on that. So I guess I took them for face value, took them at their word, and I was wrong.
Well, that was McIlroy speaking at Brookline ahead of the start of the week's US Open. That's where we can find my World Sport colleague Don Riddell as well. Great to see you, Don. What have you made of how McIlroy's assumed this role as something as a protector of the code? One of our colleagues, Christine Brennan, put it as the conscience of his sport.
Yeah, Amanda, he's become the moral compass of professional golf. He's always been a very thoughtful individual, very intellectually curious. He always says exactly what's on his mind. He rarely dodges a question when he is facing the media. And he's been very, very clear about how he feels about this and how the game should really feel about this new threat to the establishment and the heritage of professional golf. And he's spoken numerous times over the last few weeks and months about this, and it's been really interesting hearing how he kind of articulates the arguments. He spoke yesterday about how he's really kind of disappointed with the players of his age or his generation because, as he put it, he says, my best days are ahead of me, so I still think I can achieve something in this game. He says he kind of understands those who've taken just the money, although he says, in his experience, decisions that are based purely on money tend not to work out the way you think they're going to work out. He thinks that some of the players haven't really thought about it in the long term. They're not looking at the bigger picture. He says his dad always used to say to him, once you've made your bed, you lie in it. Quote, they have now made their bed. So he's been pretty damning about the whole situation. I think, of course, remember, he just won the Canadian Open at the weekend, so perhaps whilst he's very, very articulate in the way he defends the PGA Tour, the best thing he could actually do is just go out and show why the PGA Tour is so good, and he did that with an extraordinary performance in Toronto at the weekend. If this was a work of literature, McIlroy would be the hero. His nemesis would be Phil Mickelson, of course, the man who's been absolutely at the centre of this whole controversy. He did not enjoy speaking with the media on Monday. That was very, very apparent. He was much more in his element when he got out onto the course for the first time on Tuesday. He was out there playing a practice round. And if anybody was expecting that the fans and the crowd would have turned against him, That was absolutely not the case. There was so many shouts of encouragement, you the man, all the rest of it. There was no booing, there was nothing like that. And Mickelson really seemed to revel in that environment. We got all the thumbs up, there was the selfies, he was signing autographs to a big crowd at the end of the day. So Mickelson very much enjoying being back out there on the course and really milking the warmth of the fans. I spoke to some of the fans and I was like, has your opinion of Mickelson changed over the last few months? And they emphatically said no. Quote, he's doing what we all would do, which I thought was very interesting. As I said, Mickelson didn't enjoy speaking about LIV Golf. Some players are happy or at least comfortable engaging with the media on it. Not everybody is, though. This is what Brooks Koepka had to say.
I don't understand. I'm trying to focus on the U.S. Open, man. Like, I legitimately don't get it. I'm tired of the conversations. I'm tired of all this stuff. Y'all, like I said, y'all are throwing a black cloud on the U.S. Open. I think that sucks. I actually do feel bad for him for once. Right. Because it's a situation. Like, we're here to play and you talk.
Brooks Koepka's brother Chase plays on the LIV Golf Series, and after an answer like that, of course just makes people wonder, well, what does he really think? Is he going to go? Is he not? Nobody really knows, but Brooks Koepka certainly not happy this week.
There's no doubt, the chaos is overshadowing the build-up to the US Open, one of the game's most historic events. And of course, as we mentioned yesterday, this is at a venue that is so famous at the stuff of Ryder Cup legend as well. And that is an event that could hugely be impacted by what's going on at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing, Amanda. We don't really know what's going to happen to anything in the world of golf right now, the world of professional golf. And the Ryder Cup has emerged as a concern of some. You're right, Brookline is the scene, or was the scene, of one of the most famous or perhaps infamous Ryder Cups back in 1999, when the American team, which Phil Mickelson was playing on, came from 4 points behind to win the Sunday singles. It was an absolutely extraordinary day in the world of sport, and people are now wondering, where does Mickelson stand with the Ryder Cup? He's played on it 12 times. He almost certainly would have captained the American team one day. Is he going to be able to? We'll see. John Rahm is one of the top European players at the moment, and when he spoke to the media yesterday, the Ryder Cup definitely emerged as one of the things he's most concerned about now going forward.
I hope the Ryder Cup doesn't suffer. I think the Ryder Cup is the biggest attraction the game of golf has to bring new people in. So I hope we don't lose the essence and the aspect that the Ryder Cup is. That's one of my biggest concerns, to be honest. It's an event we all play for free. And it's one of our favorite weeks, win or lose. And I think that says a lot about the game.
John Rahm's Spanish compatriot, Sergio Garcia, former Masters champion, is a Ryder Cup legend. He's gone to LIV Golf. Is he going to be able to play in the Ryder Cup again? What about, for example, Lee Westwood and Ian Poulter, two men who have really built their careers around their extraordinary success in the Ryder Cup? They've gone to the Saudi-backed series. They would have been guaranteed future captains of the European team in the future. Is that going to happen anymore? Nobody knows. And for those that love the Ryder Cup, that really is something that they're pretty sad about.
Yeah, both sides so affected. Lee Westwood, Ian Poulter, but Rory McIlroy still very much in there, isn't he? Don, for now, thanks very much indeed. Yeah. Well, it's the launch of the Saudi-backed golf series that has brought one word back very much into the spotlight: sports washing. More next.
Through investment in STEM schools, Egypt has committed to building a more diverse and inclusive workforce. They are encouraging women and girls across the country to pursue careers in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. By ensuring that they are not just represented, but are also empowered to thrive across all sectors, Egypt has demonstrated their commitment to investing in the country's youth and in the mission to achieve sustainable development goals.
Monday, let's lift every voice. A CNN concert event. The Roots, Yolanda Adams, Earth, Wind & Fire, Lucky Day, Mary Mary, Killer Mike, Anthony Hamilton, Billy Porter, Debbie Allen Dance Academy, Michelle Williams, and so much more. Juneteenth, a global celebration for freedom. Live from the Hollywood Bowl, only on CNN.
No holds barred.
Out front tonight, hypocrite in chief.
No nonsense.
How stupid do you think we are?
Because getting to the truth matters. Aaron Burnett out front, Tuesday to Saturday on CNN.
We try to be global and we try to be smart. But I want to hear our authentic voices of people who are passionate or intelligent, and that's the consistency that we try to get at.
Fareed Zakaria GPS, Sundays on CNN.
This is blood money. It's just no two ways around it. It's blood money. When the athletes go to China for the Olympics, whether they approve of it being held there or not, they're not in cahoots with the CCP. They're not receiving direct payment from them. And this is exactly what this is. It's sports washing. The Saudis are rich beyond imagination. They're not going to make money on this with all the upfront money. It's not going to be a money-making tour. It's a sports washing event.
That was CNN contributor Bob Costas with his take on the new Saudi-backed Live Golf League. And as Don Riddell now reports, sports washing is a phrase that has become all too commonplace in the sporting arena.
Sport is exciting and fun. It can make you feel good. It's big business too, and governments know that investing in sports events and even teams can make them look good. There's a word for that, sports washing. Macmillan describes it as when a corrupt or tyrannical regime uses sport to enhance its reputation. Think of a sports event as a laundromat, where countries can clean up a dirty record of human rights abuse. In the last few years, Saudi Arabia has pumped billions of dollars into sport as a way to enhance its reputation. They've invested in boxing, motorsport, and horse racing. They've bought the Premier League football team, Newcastle United, and now they have the highly controversial Live Golf Series. The kingdom is trying to present a softer side. They'd rather we didn't talk about their role in the war in Yemen and the brutal murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi by Saudi agents. And the handsomely paid athletes seem happy to go along with it.
We're not politicians, we're professional golfers. And, you know, if Saudi Arabia want to use the game of golf as a way for them to get to where they want to be, and they have the resources to accelerate that experience, you know, I think we're proud to help them on that journey.
The word sports washing gained popularity in 2015 when the Sports for Rights campaign group tried to call attention to Azerbaijan's hosting of the European Games as an attempt to gloss over its controversial record on human rights. But the idea is far from original. Adolf Hitler tried it in 1936 when Nazi Germany hosted the Berlin Olympics, just 3 years before starting World War II. In more recent times, you could point to Russia's hosting of the Winter Olympics and the World Cup, while China's hosting of the Summer Games in 2008 and the 22 Winter Games were attempts to present themselves as free and fair. Both countries have controversial records in the human rights arena. Middle Eastern countries are increasingly turning to sports investment. Qatar just hosted the World Athletics Championship and will stage the FIFA World Cup in November, while Sheikh Mansour of United Arab Emirates has turned Manchester City into one of the most successful football teams in the world. As a result, some of City's fans might now be more forgiving of the UAE's restrictive approach to civil liberties. Many countries use soft power as a means of leveraging influence on the world stage, and sport is just another tool. But nobody can prove that sports washing is 100% perfect, and arguably investing in such major events could actually lead to more scrutiny than a corrupt regime would prefer. And in any case, who gets to decide who's good and who's bad? Many governments use sporting success to promote themselves internationally, and with the documented rise of nationalism around the world, is anybody really perfect anymore? Don Riddell, CNN.
Of course it is. All eyes on Qatar now in footballing terms. We've got more build-up to the World Cup coming later in the show after a nightmare showing for England as the countdown continues. But up next, the chase for the oldest trophy in North American sports is down to 2 teams. We're previewing the Stanley Cup Final next.
Hello, good morning. I started kayaking 2 years ago. I'm from Monterrey in the north of Mexico, and this activity is not very common in my city. All the time that I'm inside the mangroves, it's just me and the kayak. It's a very good moment to relax and to stop thinking about other problems and enjoying all this nature that we have. The combination between workout and nature is what makes me disconnect from the city.
Back in person, the 2022 Afreximbank annual meetings will bring together high-profile continental and global leaders to harness and leverage Africa's incredible potential. Register now.
Welcome back. Now, if reports are to be believed, this year's Stanley Cup Final could be one of the best head-to-head showdowns the NHL has produced in years. Two heavyweights, the two-time defending champions Tampa Bay Lightning, up against a talent-packed and hungry Colorado Avalanche. But do not take my word for it. Two men far better placed to give you the lowdown. CNN Sports Coy Wire and NHL commentator of 15 years, Dan Kamal. Guys, are you getting as carried away as everyone else?
Oh, absolutely, especially me right now, Amanda. Come one, come all. It's Dan Kamal. You want to know how big of a deal this guy is? I posted an Instagram video with him just a bit ago, and Tampa Bay Lightning longtime veteran Zach Bogosian texts me and says, "Was that Dan Kamal?" Tell him I said hello. He's a longtime broadcaster, well respected and well positioned to break this down for us. Let's talk about the Lightning. They could become, Dan, the first NHL team to three-peat in 40 years. How are they able to do this in this era of the salary cap?
Yeah, Coy, they would join only 3 other teams that have ever won 3 in a row. They do it by adapting, and they do it with great management, great scouting, great coaching. I mean, it's amazing how adaptable they are. You want to play a defensive style, as they had to in the 2020 Cup win, or you want to play more explosively, as they have had to do against Florida, against the Rangers, against Toronto. They can adapt.
Now, a Lightning defenseman, Ryan McDonough, said that we hate to lose as much as we like to win, and I can't envision any other team hoisting that cup. Dan, the Colorado Avalanche, though, they are the favorites. Home ice advantage in front of fans who haven't seen them play in the final since they won it back in 2001. What are some of the key matchups to watch in this final?
I think the Avalanche will present the biggest test so far for Tampa. I say explosively on offense, Nathan MacKinnon and Nikita Kucherov both can light it up for the Avalanche and the Lightning, respectively. 2 of the maybe 3 or 4 or 5 best defensemen in the world are going to be showcased. We have Cale Makar for the Avalanche. We have Victor Hedman for the Tampa Bay Lightning. And you have the greatest goaltender, maybe one of the top 2 or 3 in the world, Vasilevsky for Tampa. So there are big stars coming out for this ultimate NHL showcase.
Yeah, it could come down to those goalies too. You mentioned Andrei Vasilevsky. He's been there with the Lightning the last 2 cups that they've won, while the Avalanche, on the other hand, they're going to have an injured group coming back. Darcy Kemper, they say he's 100%, but also backup Pavel Francouz has been in there battling it out. Now, Dan, LeBron James, in awe of Lord Stanley's Cup this week. The Stanley Cup's the oldest trophy competed for by pro athletes in North America, donated by Lord Stanley of Preston in 1892. What are some of the traditions that make the cup so special?
You know, one of the things I remember is Andrew Ladd sitting on a mountaintop with the cup. I mean, it's a gorgeous trophy. It's just a beautiful trophy, first and foremost. And the stories behind the trophy. Every member of a winning team gets to spend a day with the cup. You've had babies bathed in there. You've had cocktails drunk from the cup. You've had the cup dropped into swimming pools. You've had misspellings on the cup, like the 80-81 Islanders, whose team name was misspelled. It's just got great tradition.
Chris Draper back in '98 with Detroit, he's put his baby daughter in it. She turned it into a toilet. She had an accident. Hey, 2 forces of nature, Avalanche and Lightning, battling it out in a sport where having no teeth is like a badge of honor, Amanda. Stanley Cup Final, Game 1, just hours away.
Let's hope none of those hopes go down the toilet in Game 1. Dan, Coy, great to hear from you both. Now, it has had the longest build-up for any World Cup finals to date. But with just 159 days to go, the teams are finally set. Costa Rica booked their place as the 32nd and final team. And look what it meant to them.
Wherever you go in the world, one airline goes further to make it feel exceptional. Qatar Airways, going places together.